Over the years, I've owned a lot of robotic vacuum cleaners. In fact, I think 10 of them, if I'm remembering correctly, but all of them have sucked. They're just not any good. Has Matic Robotics finally cracked this problem and invented a really good vacuum cleaner and mop that actually works automatically? Well, let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I'm super excited to review this Matic robotic vacuum and mop. It is, of course, an all-in-one. It does vacuuming and mopping, and it's all autonomous, and it does it in a very new way that's kind of Tesla-inspired. It uses deep neural networks and things instead of the old-school stuff that's been around for over 20 years now that Roomba and other companies use. So we're going to do a complete review of the robot, and I'm going to switch back and forth between here and using my iPhone to record some things, so the mic is going to change and stuff like that. I wanted to do a complete review. Then I will do a pros and cons review, and finally I will do a review of whether we are going to keep the robotic vacuum. That leads me to the disclaimer. That leads me to this disclaimer, which is that Matic Robotics was kind enough to send me a review copy of the robot so that I could check it out. I've had it for almost a month now, and I've used it very extensively in that time, so I feel like I'm pretty well grounded to do this review. While they did loan me the robot, I have complete editorial control. They will not see this video before I publish it, so you can take this as honest opinion. And at the end of the trial period, I either have to return the robot or I have to purchase it from Matic Robotics. So if you watch this all the way to the end, you'll get my verdict on whether we're going to return the robot or keep it. All right, first things first, let's go to the unboxing, which is rather unique. When you open up the box that it comes in, you get a cute thing because you're allowed to decorate your Matic, and of course you have to give it a name. So I don't know, we're going to call it Wally. Kind of looks like Wally, so I think maybe we'll call it Wally. Plus some information and all that stuff, but then the really cool part is supposedly you can just put it on the ground, and yeah, thank you, Kona. Pull out the tabs. This is very Apple-esque in their way of thinking about packaging here. And then slowly lift this up. Are you gonna say hi? You gonna say hello to the little Matic? All right, and then we just long press. There we go. Oh, it even says hello, Gibbs family. Wow, it knows who we are. That's crazy. And yeah, it's rolling out to say hello to us. And Kona is very much a fan, as we can tell. That is a pretty cool unboxing, right? You got to give it the unboxing cred for it just rolling out and doing it on its own. So pretty cool. So as you saw, after it rolls off its container and everything, the first thing it requests is that it can map the house. Ideally, what you would do is do this during a time when you can open up all the doors and probably decent light, either turn on the lights in the house, or if it's light outside, that makes it easier because it does do a visual mapping of the entire house. And we'll get to the details of that when we get to the tech specifications. And of course, while we're on that topic, let's turn to the all-important application that comes with the Matic robot. That, of course, is the interface from which you interact with the robot primarily. Really on the screen, it's only got a play pause button. So that's basically it. It has a really nice information screen that tells you what's going on. But in order to interact with the robot, at least for now, and I'll talk about future features to come, you need to use the app to do your primary interface. The app is overall really good, especially for, this is all very, very early stuff. They've only started selling the robot, gone out of prototype into actual sales in the last few months. So this is a brand new baby here, and the app is really good. I do have one ding about the app. I'll get to that in the cons later. But overall, after it maps the house, it determines what is carpet, what is hardwood floor. It subdivides the rooms according to what it thinks is the best subdivision of the rooms. And then you have the choice of scheduled cleaning, where you can tell it which rooms to clean at what hours. You can, of course, pick a room and tell it to clean that immediately. And coolest of all, there's sort of like a pencil feature where you can just sort of outline an area and say, go over here and clean that. So if you spilled something or noticed that by the doorway was very, very dirty from leaves blowing in or whatever, you can just tell it to go straight there, clean up that area, and come back, and it will just take care of that. So that gets us to the first cleaning. The robot will go around after it's mapped the house, and it will clean. And one thing we immediately noticed was we had a lot of dirt on the floor. After the robot, goes around and cleans on a regular schedule, it's not so much, but that first time I was like, geez. And we have an expensive Dyson plug-in vacuum cleaner, like a manual one that you actually use yourself that we own. And I was still very shocked at how much dirt the Matic actually picked picked up. So the way the Matic works is first it vacuums the interiors. It actually goes around in any place that needs vacuuming, hardwood floors and carpeting. It vacuums the interior parts. Then it goes around the edges. So it'll do the middle part first. So imagine if you have like a rectangular carpet, it does the middle part first, then it goes around and does the edges, and then it does the toe kicks. And that's the area, like if you have a cabinet that sticks out or something, there's a little space underneath it. You can see that the design of the robot is such that the big square container that sits upright is separated from the vacuum head and the mopping head, so it can actually get underneath those toe kick areas and clean those out. And then once it completes the vacuuming in that sequence, so interior edges and toe kicks, it then goes around, and if it's a moppable surface, in other words, not a carpet, if it's a hardwood floor or tile or something like that, it goes around and mops it in the same sequence. So the interior, the edges, and the toe kicks. So three very important features about the Matic is, number one, the vacuum head is separated out from the body. So the body is much bigger. You can have a much larger, bag that you put dirt into. You can have a much larger water container than most of these flat disc vacuums. And then the mop and vacuum head sits off the edge and pivots up and down so that it can go over large transitions. It can lift itself up over things and go over obstacles and stuff like that. So it's a first principle design. They went back to first principles and didn't say like, hey, we have to make just a flat disc like every other robot vacuum company out there. They decided to think for themselves and come up with something new, and it's much, much better. And then in conjunction with that, they have very, very large wheels. As Mehul said when he did his interview with me, if you haven't seen that, definitely check it out up here. He actually came to my house and interviewed with me a couple of weeks ago, which was really amazing. That tells you all you need to know about the company, that one of the co-founders will come and talk to, just a person like me. But anyway, as Mehul said, that in the old days, back when the original Roombas were made, back around early 2000s and stuff, most of the houses had wall-to-wall carpeting or like a complete room that had tile, like a kitchen or something. And they didn't have mostly hardwood floors with deep pile carpets that were sitting on those. But now in 2025, that's very much the standard. You have, hardwood floors, you have tile, and then you have area rugs that have very deep piles, so they can be an inch or two above the hardwood surface. And the larger wheels allow the Matic to go up over these transitions without any problems. Many of the previous robot vacuums that I've owned, and I've owned everything from very expensive Roombas that were like $1,000 down to like $200 cheap Chinese disc robots, and they all fail miserably at this. They hit these deep pile carpets and they bounce off them and stuff. They don't ride up over them very effectively. But the Matic is basically an SUV. It basically, has big wheels, so it can go up over these different types of terrains and things like that. And it's very effective. In fact, one time I had my back door open and it just drove right over the threshold out onto the back deck. So I was like, oopsie, we've got to correct for that problem. So that is actually a kind of a small downside, is that it can actually go outside. It can go over door thresholds and things like that, which was pretty impressive because it's high. There's a lot of bumpiness to that, and it made it right over that, no problem at all. And then the third really big sort of hardware feature on it is that the mop and vacuum head is separate, and it can pivot, and actually it vacuums and mops in different ways. So when it vacuums, it actually pivots the head down and vacuums this way, and then when it mops, it pivots the head this way, and so it runs the roller. So the roller's at the back of that little unit there, and it rolls the mop and wrings it out and everything, and when it's vacuuming, it actually tips it the other direction so that the brush is in contact with the floor. And the Matic actually drives forward when it's vacuuming and backwards when it's mopping. It's got eyes on both sides, so it can see both ways, and that allows it to vacuum and mop without creating the really gross, messy thing. Most robot vacuums just sort of drag a wet cloth behind the vacuuming. It kind of sort of works, but it's gross and it creates a lot of dirt, and you end up with little dirt piles everywhere and things like that. The Matic, when it is done, it is immaculate. I mean, there's no little dirt spots and things like that. It's a fantastic cleaning job. So now let's take a look at a once over of the Matic itself. All right, so let's take a quick tour of the Matic vacuum that we are calling Wally because, for obvious reasons, or maybe Eva too. So a couple of things. Number one, there's a panel here that you can see with. We also have an up-facing camera, which will supposedly come in useful in the future. Single button interface. Most of it is done through the app, obviously. And then, of course, we have our dock back here. If we roll it off, there's the dock. Roll it back on again. You can see it turns green because it's charging. It just finished doing something. There is a water tank here with a black bottom on it. You just unscrew that quickly and it just drops right in there. Super easy. Huge water tank, by the way. And then the bag is the bag. This is partially full. I just had to do a whole test with ketchup and Coke and stuff like that, so the bottom is gross. But the beautiful part is it's HEPA filter, and when you're done, just chuck it. So, right, you're all done. And then for the water tank, they recommend putting a tiny little bit, like a half a capful of Aunt Fanny's multi-surface floor cleaner. I will leave a link to that in the description, but basically that's it from the top. In terms of doing any kind of quick repair work, again, you can see the large Kona wants to, she's reviewing the product too. This has been going for over a month. I just noticed that the tires have a little bit of hair on them, but let's take a look. Kona, can you excuse me for a second? Anyway, we've got our 2 front-facing cameras. There's a similar 2 facing back cameras as well. If you open this up, you can see the roller brush, which is, I have not ever removed hairs from this. This is remarkable. I mean, for real remarkable, because every other brush that I've ever used on every other vacuum, and I think I've owned 8 or 9, has just gotten completely clogged up with hair, and it's really gross. I believe this is anti-static, but it also might be a way of removing the hair from the brush as it goes, because it looks like what it does is it funnels it down here, and then it's removed, and then it gets sucked into the cleaner as we go. Okay, and then Kona, if you excuse me for a second, to access the mop elements of this, you just pop this thing out. So you can see there's like a tube with the mop. This part here, there's a little plastic insert. I don't have 2 hands, but anyway, you can disassociate, you just pull the mop, this part off of it. So anyway, there you go. You just pop this guy off and you can replace that. This part, of course, is permanent and just goes in. And then there is further this little orange guy here that you can pop out that, again, I just had it cleaning, so you can see that it's got a little bit of dirt in those holes. But basically, if it gets full, you can see, actually it looks like the pug is what's most of the hair. But when it gets full up, you just rinse it in the water and stick it back in again. There's a little guide right there, and you just slide it in, and in it goes. And then you put this back on, you pop it back into place, and it's really easy. I mean, that's the only maintenance. You don't have to pick the thing up or turn it over or anything like that, so it's really wonderful. So just a real quick recap, there is a large water tank. It's big enough that you can actually, it does the entire house. You don't have to worry about refilling it all the time. That is very unique. As noted, a tiny amount of Miss Fanny's is their recommended additive to the water. If you want a link to that, I've got it in the description. On Amazon, you can buy it easily. It's not very expensive. And then, of course, the disposable bags are clear, so you can see through them. They have a HEPA filter built in, so that's replaced every time you replace the bag. And they have diaper crystals in them, so that as the liquid water comes out of the mop wringer, as it's being wrung out, that goes into the bag and it gets sort of crystallized and solidified, so that all of that stuff isn't messy, and you just take out one bag, throw it away, and you're done. You don't have to deal with all the messy grossness of dirty water containers and things like that. So now let's talk about the hardware and software that's inside the Matic that allows it to be so different and unique. The first thing is it's entirely vision-based. It doesn't have a LiDAR system. If you have a lot of the old disc ones, you'll see like a little thing that spins on top. That's a LiDAR system where it's shooting out beams and things like that. If you look at a mapping of the house, and I'll show like a flyover thing, you can do like a little airplane thing. So if you push that, you can like sort of fly over the house. But you'll see that basically from 8 or 9 inches up in the air, it maps out everything from that perspective. So it kind of knows the bottom 2 feet of your house really well, and it knows it visually, not LiDAR. In other words, it's not like a black and white image. It actually has color information. So you can see that the carpet, the tile, all the colors of those things is actually represented, because when it did the mapping, it utilized vision instead of LiDAR to understand what was going on. So it uses a form of visual simultaneous location and mapping, or VSLAM, but it's something that Matic actually created themselves. As Mehul said, they thought this was going to be trivial. They thought it was open source. It turned out it was not. They've also mixed that in with neural networks and occupancy networks that was inspired by Tesla's full self-driving, where they're actually mapping out the voxels, the actual 3-dimensional sort of cubes of space, down to about the 1 centimeter cubed level. So, approximately that big. And Mehul said that eventually they want to get to like, 0.5 centimeters cubed or something like that. So down into the millimeter cubed range. So it's got 5 visible and infrared cameras on it, 2 on the front, 2 on the back, so it can go forwards and backwards, and then 1 on the top that's for future enhancements that they're going to have. And because these cameras can see into the infrared, they can see at night. And also there are inbuilt infrared flashlights that you can see if there's low light, and I'll show a video of that where you can actually see it flashing. You can't see this with your human eyes, but with a camera you can actually see it flashing with infrared. And that allows the robot to actually function completely in the dark. Like, I have it start at 5 o'clock in the morning, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So it's just operating while we're sleeping, and it's very, very dark.
dark at that point, and the robot does fantastic because it can see in the dark. This is something that other bot manufacturers claim they can do, but between the fact that they're so much noisier than the Matic and the fact that they really can't see in the dark, they actually do very, very poorly at this. So I was actually, hesitant to try this at first, but when Mayhew told me he actually runs his at 2 o'clock in the morning, I was like, well, let's try 5 o'clock in the morning. So basically it's done by the time we get up at 7. And that actually works, and it's amazing. The other thing that's super important is it's actually very quiet, with one small asterisk and caveat to that, which I'll get to near the end of this review. But it's very quiet. You can hold a conversation, you can watch TV, you can be sleeping in another room. So if it cleans the living room and dining room and kitchen while you're sleeping in your bedroom, you won't notice it, you won't hear it. So unlike many of the other robot vacuums that are very, very loud, because of the shape of the Matic vacuum and the efficiency of the vacuum head, it actually works really, really well to run at night. And as this image shows, it's powered by NVIDIA's Jetson Orin Nano board with 4 gigabytes of RAM on it. So 4 gigabytes allows them to do multiple rooms up to 20,000 square feet. I don't have nearly that much space, but it did map our upstairs and our downstairs, and it knows the difference. You can pick up the robot, you can just move it someplace, and because it actually has mapped itself out into these areas and understands where it is, it has a semantic understanding of the area. You set it down anywhere in the house after it's mapped it, of course, and it will figure out where it is, and you can actually watch it. It'll be like someplace else, and then all of a sudden it'll go whoop, and it'll just go like right to the spot where you were after you set it down and wait like 5 or 10 seconds. It's very, very quick, and it's super cool that it can do that. Other robot vacuums just can't do that. They only have relative mapping. So the Matic always knows where it is all the time. It's never like going like, I think I'm here, I'm not sure. It knows exactly where it is because it can see and it can map that to its memory. And it can do it, like I said, up to 20,000 square feet, although I don't have nearly that much in my house. That means this could actually be useful in a commercial setting. It could actually vacuum the entire floor of a building or something at night. As for how the software works, of course, that's proprietary, but Mayhew told me it's a combination of deep neural networks plus more traditional machine learning techniques. And like I said, they definitely have an occupancy network where they voxelize the universe around the robot into 1 centimeter cubed, little cubes, and it figures out what is vacuumable, what's not, what's a carpet, what's hardwood floor, things like that. So it just sort of knows where it is and what it's doing. And on the future front, this is not enabled yet, but supposedly the upward facing camera will allow gesture controls, so you can actually like point at something and tell it where to go, what to clean up. It will also have audio mode, so you'll be able to say, hey Matic, clean the living room, or hey Matic, there's a spill over here, and point to it. So it can use multimodal input and output, and it should be able to respond to your commands as well by, saying something like confirmed or going there or whatever. So currently you have to use the app to do all of these things, but that is coming. And again, remember, this is an early stage product. It's only going to get better. They're releasing software updates all the time. I can see the little number on the Matic display screen increasing all the time. The app is being updated all the time. So they're very aggressively updating the firmware and the software, and that just makes the robot get better and better. And speaking of smarts, the robot actually learns. It's a little difficult to see this in action, but I think I've seen it happen. It's run into a couple of situations. At one point, it got itself stuck inside of a chair, and I'll show a picture of that. It kind of like managed to get in there and it couldn't get out, and it hasn't done that again. So I think it's learned not to do that. This is something that is entirely different than these dumb vacuums that will do the same mistake over and over again. They'll drive over a cord over and over again. The Matic is amazing. If it sees cords or cables or things, it like reroutes itself and it avoids driving over those. It has had some problems with like hanging ones. I sometimes have like a power supply that I use on my laptop computer, and it hangs about this far off the ground, which is just exactly where the robot likes to drive. So anyway, at one point it actually drove into one of those and disconnected it and ingested it into the roller, into the vacuum roller. But the amazing part was, as opposed to every other robot ever, it actually unwound it and backed itself out because it realized that it had caused a problem, and it was like, whoopsie, and it was able to, undo itself, undo the problem, and then continue on. This is the kind of thing that would have been a showstopper. It also would have eaten the cord and kind of damaged it or something like that. The cord was not damaged at all. And again, again, it's something that has never happened again, so I don't know if it's learned that kind of stuff, but supposedly it is able to learn, as opposed to all of these other robots that just don't learn. They do the same mistake over and over and over again. It's so frustrating. This is really cool that it makes a mistake and then it doesn't seem to make that mistake again. So that fact alone makes this vacuum and mop incredibly valuable. It's just a fire and forget. And if it makes a mistake, it doesn't make it again. And basically now, after using it for a month, it just does its thing. I don't really have to pay attention to it unless the dirt bag gets full or something like that. If that happens, then I have to interact with it. But otherwise, it just goes and does its thing, and it's just sort of done. I come home and everything's clean. So now let's turn to its performance in the real world. The first thing to note is it's not going to be fast. If you want it to do, say, 2,000 square feet, which is approximately what our upstairs is, if you want it to vacuum and mop that much, it's going to take about 4 hours and probably have to do a single recharge. So again, it's going to depend on your floor type, how much carpeting you have, all of that kind of stuff. But, so it's not something that you can just fire it off and have it clean the whole house in like a half an hour, but a human probably couldn't do that either. So anyway, it will take longer than a human, but again, because it's relatively quiet and it doesn't require interaction with you, it doesn't require you to constantly go and rescue it from places that it needs to go to. You don't really have to worry about it. Just set it up for a time when people aren't home, or set it up for a time when it's convenient, and it just goes and does it itself. Like I said earlier, it picks up a lot of dirt. It's a quiet vacuum. It's not that loud, but it picks up a lot of dirt. It was surprising how much dirt it picked up, and that's great because it keeps things much cleaner. I had a disc vacuum that we were using before we got the Matic, and it's, the swap was just kind of mind-blowing. The carpets, the floors, everything were so much cleaner after the Matic than using the old disc vacuum. One thing, as Misinformation or Lane works at home, we've sort of split up the cleaning, so I have it do the kitchen and the dining room and the living room and a couple of hallways at 5 o'clock in the morning, so it gets those done, and then it does like the bedrooms and a couple of bathrooms and things like that at 6 o'clock at night. So it sort of avoids the main part of the day when she's working at home. That seems to work well. You adjust as you need to, but that works very well for us, and that means that the robot doesn't have to take like 4 hours all at once. It can do like 2.5 hours or something, clean up some of the rooms, then it can go rest for the rest of the day, then it can go out and it can clean up the bedrooms and things like that at night, which is nice because you're going to go to bed later, and so you have a nice clean bedroom and bathroom as you're getting ready for bed. So we have Kona. You saw her when I was doing the, like look around of the robot itself. She's a pug. She's super interested in Matic, and she likes to follow it around and stuff, and it's really good at avoiding her. It doesn't bump into anything. I would say that's another really cool thing, unlike those other ones that are like slam, slam, slam. They just keep hitting walls and stuff like that. Doesn't hit anything, doesn't slam into walls, doesn't hit the dog. If you leave some dog toys out or things like that, it avoids those, so it understands that as well. And now for an extreme real world test, I'm going to have it clean up some ketchup and a Coke spill as well, and we'll see how well it does. Alrighty, we're gonna try a spill test here. I've told it to only mop. It complained about that and said it should vacuum first, but I didn't really want it to try to vacuum these spills. So what we've got here is we've got ketchup and we've got Coke. Yeah, it did something. It had to think about that. That was pretty good though. There's a little bit left here, but clearly it identified that because it went around it at first, which is cool. So I don't know if it's doing the same thing with the Coke spill or not, but it seemed to identify that. There is a little bit left here, but the Coke spill, it seems to be driving over a little more cavalierly. Although I can hear. Okay. Yeah, it seems to be doing something. I can hear the mop actually, like, it sounds like it's like, I don't know, maybe putting more water into it. All right, so it did a pretty good job, right? It cleaned up and it understood where the ketchup was in particular. You could see it kind of going around the ketchup and then cleaning the ketchup. And then the Coke, when it kind of just took that one in stride, maybe it either didn't see it or just was like, it's not a big enough deal. It's just water anyway, I'll get it. But the ketchup in particular, it took special care to clean up that particular area. And with that, let's get to the review, the pros and cons, and then my verdict at the end. So first big pro is it's really smart. That Jetson Orin board, the neural networks, all of the work they've done on the hardware and the software really pays off. This thing is an actual smart vacuum and robot. And because of that, there's no real need to monitor the robot. It just does its thing. You don't have to worry about it. That is not the case for any other vacuum and mop I've ever owned. You always have to interact with them, rescue them, things like that. So that by itself is worth the price of admission right there. The fact that you don't have to worry about it and it does a good job. The second pro is that it's actually vision based and not LiDAR based. So it actually understands floor types. It knows what colors things are. It's able to understand that this is a carpet and this is a hardwood floor. It just does all that stuff. It doesn't use LiDAR. It uses good quality cameras, and that's all that's necessary, as Tesla has proven with their cars. This would be the Tesla equivalent of a vacuum and a mop. And as Mehul told me, they were inspired by Tesla and their full self-driving, a lot of the advancements that were made with that, to go with a vision-only system and an occupancy-based network system, as opposed to the traditional LiDAR system. Another advantage, it can run in complete darkness. That's actually really huge. As I said before, it learns. It seems to be learning about things and not making the same mistakes twice, which is also huge. Another big advantage, it can learn multiple maps. So if you have multiple floors or different areas and things like that, it can learn these multiple maps up to about 20,000 square feet. That's a massive amount of square footage. Next up, big advantage is those big wheels. I mean, it makes it like an SUV or a four-wheeler or something. It gets over everything. So it does fantastic on transitions between hardwood floor and big high pile carpets. It's really good. Next up, it can extract itself from problems. In other words, if it runs into a problem, it's generally able to extract itself from that problem, including the very unusual case of ingesting a cord or something like that. It's able to extract itself from that situation. And of course, because it's fully vision based, it's able to see things. It's able to know, like, this is a cup. Even things that are small, like this is a pen, it's able to see that as an individual entity on the floor and avoid that. So not only can it extract itself from problems, but it's able to avoid those problems entirely in the first place. The maintenance is super easy. The mop end of things, you just pull it out, clean it off, put it back in again. And the brush I haven't even had to interact with yet, which is just crazy because all the other brushes would get hairs and things like that all tangled up. This just doesn't seem to have a problem, so it's super low maintenance. And for the first time ever with a robot vacuum, and I've owned one since maybe 2007 or 2008, you don't need a manual vacuum anymore. This is actually good enough that it works. You don't have to own two vacuum cleaners. You don't have to have an electric one that you run after it once a week to clean up all the crap that the vacuum didn't pick up. The Matic works. It cleans up that stuff. You honestly don't even need a mop and a bucket anymore either, because it's able to do that as well. So that is really amazing to me. That was quite the revelation. Next big advantage is it's quiet. I'm going to put an asterisk on that and get back to that with the cons in a moment, but it is definitely quieter than any manual vacuum, in other words, the electrical ones, and it's quieter than any other robot vacuum I've come across as well, at least ones that work. I mean, there are some super low power ones that are very quiet, but they don't pick up any dirt. So this has the combination of being able to pick up dirt and be very quiet. And of course, when it's mopping, it's really quiet because it's just running a mop head. It's not vacuuming. Another big advantage is that it vacuums and then it mops, as opposed to most of these robot vacuums that just sort of vacuum and then, like I said, drag a wet cloth behind it, which just creates a really gross situation. It vacuums forward, it cleans everything up for a whole area, then it goes backwards and it mops everything, and it's really good. I mean, there's just no problems after it gets done. The next advantage is the bags, the fact that it's got this HEPA filter built in, it's got the diaper crystals, things like that allow it to clean up both hard, fur and dirt and things like that. And in addition, liquid waste and all of that kind of stuff is a huge advantage, again, with an asterisk. I'll get back to that in a moment. And then a final advantage is it's cute. We named ours Wally. It looks like Wally to me. It looks kind of a cross between Wally and Eva if they had a baby. But anyway, so maybe we should call it Weeva or something. But anyway, we named it. It's adorable. It comes with little stickers and things like that if you want them. You can put googly eyes on it if you want. So you can really make it very cute. And the cuteness and the roundedness and the very bright colors, the black and white, things like that, just make it very approachable. It doesn't feel scary. It doesn't feel like something that might run into you and, hit you in the shin or something. It's just very cute, very adorable. And I consider that an advantage for a home-based robot. And I think people who are building humanoid robots and other types of form factors for the house should consider that. You don't want something creepy in the house. You want something adorable and cute. All right, on to the cons. I'm going to go back to the bags. The bags are an advantage, but they are also a big disadvantage. I'm not a particularly big fan of throwing away things like that. I don't like it. I don't like the expense. I have to admit that they don't charge a lot for the bags, and Mehul specifically said when I was talking to him that their intention is not to make money off of the consumables like the bags and stuff like that, but to sell it at cost, because they just want it to be something that consumers don't feel the need to, like, you know, somehow like cut the bags open and dump out the stuff and re-duct tape it closed and, you know, do all the weird stuff that you usually have to do to avoid paying an arm and a leg. So the bags themselves are not very expensive, and you can order them directly through the app. So it's very, very convenient to do that. But still, it is a little bit wasteful. I'm not a big fan of having bags. I'd rather have a canister, but I do also, after using it for a month, at first I was like, heck no, heck no, heck no. But I'm not as adamant about that anymore, because I also do like the fact that I can just go whoop and just throw it in the garbage. Don't have to think about it. So I'm not as negative on it as I was at first, because number one, the cost is lower than I thought. And number two, the advantages, the fact that it's got the clear plastic, it's got the diaper crystals. You can see how full it is. It's got the HEPA filter built in, so you don't have to replace the HEPA filter. All of those things make this bag less negative than most other companies. The second con is that the vacuum is not fast. It takes hours for it to vacuum and mop. It's not something that it just does it super fast. One of the issues I found, and this is something I noted to Mehul when we were talking, and he said, yeah, we're going to work on this in a software update, is that it'll vacuum an area and then it'll be like going to next area, and it'll go vacuum over here, and then it'll go vacuum over here. And so it like vacuums little pieces and things like that instead of doing a continuous block and just doing one area. Now, one thing that I've done, I'm going to get to the app in just a second, is I've redivided the rooms up into smaller areas. So hopefully that is going to help it to be more efficient about the way it cleans, but it spends a lot of time transporting itself around. And that's the kind of thing that I think could make the process faster and more energy efficient, because, you know, you don't want it to get like halfway through and then run out of steam and have to go back and charge for an hour and then go back out and keep going. It would be more ideal if it could complete an area first and then go charge. The next disadvantage, and this is a small one, is that because it's so tall, it can't go underneath our beds completely. It can get under it, you know, as far as the little vacuum mop head can go. So it goes partly under the beds, but it can't go all the way. You know, that's not an area that needs cleaning all that frequently. And if you have a taller bed that has, you know, bigger feet or something, it will go right underneath those. Just so happens that ours are shorter than that. You know, the legs are only about yay tall, and so it can't fit underneath them. So it can't clean completely under the bed. So this might be an area where you actually would need a manual vacuum cleaner, but honestly, it's hard to get a manual vacuum underneath the bed as well. Next up on the disadvantages are that it has a hard time seeing thin horizontal things like the bars of a chair or a cable that's strung across the air, not on the ground. It's really good at seeing it on the ground, not so good at seeing it in the air. But like I said, I think it's learning. So it's actually run into those a few times in the early days, but it doesn't seem to do that anymore. So I think it's learned. So disadvantage that it can't see that. This is very, very common with scanline visual interfaces, by the way. So definitely not unique to Matic that it has problems with that, but it seems to have figured out and done a better job with them in the last couple of weeks versus the first couple of weeks. So if it has learned, fantastic, that gets rid of that negative. Next up on the noise front is it is less noisy than all other robot vacuums and all other manual vacuums, but it has a high-pitched whine. We don't know if that's our particular unit. It is possible that just ours has it, but it's got like this, you know, high frequency, somewhere around 8 to 10,000 hertz, like very, very high frequency, kind of whining noise that goes on, which you don't notice if you're not near it, because that frequency, you know, goes away. If you go through walls and stuff like that, you really don't hear it. But if you're up close to it watching TV or in a meeting or something, you'll hear that high-pitched whiny noise, which is why I've sort of split up the cleaning. So it does some of the cleaning at like 5 o'clock in the morning and some at 6 o'clock at night. And it doesn't really fill up the middle of the day when misinformation is working and doesn't want that high-pitched whining noise. So this is something where Matic, if you guys have some feedback about that or information, you can definitely leave a comment and I will heart it. I don't know the reason for that. I don't know if our particular unit has an issue, but it does have a high-pitched whine, even though the general cleaning sound is much, much quieter than pretty much every other vacuum. Next up, it's still an early release. This is an early release product. The hardware and software, and particularly the software, you know, still has a ways to go. For one thing, you actually have to tell it where stairs are in your house. It won't just auto-detect them. I think it will auto-detect them, but they recommend that you tell it where stairs are. You don't want this thing falling downstairs. It's very expensive and very heavy. So, you know, you have You have to go like, this is where stairs are, don't go over here. We just so happen to have a door that blocks off the stairs, but of course, if we ever leave the door open, I have mapped out that area and said, these are stairs, don't go here. So it understands that, but that's a caveat for now. It's supposed to get better about that in the future and understand. Another beta aspect that goes with the app is that it's very difficult to subdivide rooms in the app. It's really hard. We have an open space, our kitchen, living room, dining room, hallway, back laundry room, into the bedrooms. All of that is one giant space, and it didn't do a very good job of separating those into separate rooms. And then when I went back to try to separate them because I wanted to have it be more efficient in the way it cleans, it was hard. I'd rather be able to draw like an outline. All you can do is draw like one line and tell it to divide rooms up, and that's not fantastic. So that needs to be updated. I would rather be able to draw like a polygon and go like, this is a room, because it would be much, much easier to do that than to try to subdivide and merge these rooms back and forth to try to get it into the right shape. So they definitely need to improve that in the app as well. Another disadvantage is that the mopping is not quite edge to edge. When you're vacuuming, there's a little brush that spins around and can get way, way down under the toe kicks and, you know, all that edge dirt that comes out there. When it's mopping and going backwards, it doesn't quite get to just the edge of the toe kicks. So there's a little bit of area that doesn't quite get cleaned for that. And a final disadvantage, but this is shared by every robot vacuum out there ever, and probably for all the future until we have humanoid bots, is it can't go up and downstairs. So I have to carry it downstairs if I wanted to clean the downstairs area. That's something that I'm not going to give it too much of a ding about, because that would require making it into a person basically in order to fix that, but it is worth noting. And finally, we get to the verdict. What is my overall opinion? My overall opinion is it is not for everybody, because it's about $1,200. So that is not an inexpensive item to purchase. You can purchase a cheap Chinese one for like $150 or $200 on Temu or something like that. Although of course, with tariffs these days in the United States, who knows how much it's going to cost. By the way, this Matic is actually built in the United States. So even though it's going to have some tariff exposure because of parts and boards being built in other places, they build it in the US. So if you care about that thing, I personally think that's fantastic, and congrats to Matic for doing that. If you do have the money, and I have spent way more than the $1,200 price tag on this Matic vacuum over the years purchasing these robot vacuums, I've probably spent between $4,000 and $5,000 since 2008 on robot vacuums. This is the last one I will need. I won't have to buy another one. So while this robot is expensive, I've spent way more money on all of these other robot vacuums, and they've all pretty much blown. They're not that good. So I have not been satisfied with them, and I've spent an awful lot of money on them. So in that regard, $1,200 doesn't seem quite so bad anymore. And amazingly, hot off the press, I texted Mehul about this and asked if he could get a code for all of you. And he said if you use the code MATIC50, you'll get $50 off the cost of the robot vacuum. So check out the link in the description, and I will leave the code down there as well. So there you go, folks. That's how cool this company is. And that actually leads me to another thing, which is that you can support a small company trying to disrupt the world of robotics and vacuum cleaning and mopping in this case, but they have grand plans. They have other things that they're going to do in the future. So by purchasing this, you can help support a small startup company, and their customer service is bar none. I mean, I'm talking to a co-founder, I'm texting back and forth with him, and they are fantastic. They respond to things. They're just amazing people. I really, really like them. And that is it's a big deal for me to support small companies that are trying to do the right thing. So as might be quite obvious from this review, are we going to purchase it for our house when our loan term ends? Yes, we will. We love this robot. We love our little Wally. It goes around, it does what it needs to do. We don't have to think about it. Kona loves it. She just follows it around when it's out vacuuming and things like that, and just kind of sniffs at it and stuff. And it avoids her. It's fantastic. It's very cute. It's quiet. It does what it needs to. You don't have to think about it. Once every couple of days, I refill the water tank, and I toss out the bag when it gets full. And that's really all I have to worry about. It's pretty amazing. So that is my complete review of the Matic robot into a lot of detail. I hope that was beneficial to everybody. If it was, please do like the video. It super, super helps out. It helps other people to find it. And of course, if you want to see more reviews like this and other thoughts on AI and other subjects, then definitely consider subscribing, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.